Going to start this evening with a topic from Srimad Bhagavatam, believe it or not. Kapila Dev and his talks with Devahuti. Sometimes great devotees take the position of being one of us. They do so deliberately, or they do so by the arrangement of Krishna's potencies. So Devahuti's speaking as if she's one of us. And she's asking a question that ends up taking 7 chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam to answer in thoroughly, completely. And she's clear enough and honest enough with herself to understand the nature of attachment to the temporary, and she's expressing that she's too much attached to the bodily conception of life. And in the bodily conception of life, the conception of mind, because from I comes mind. So, and perfectly natural. She's been with her husband for tens of thousands of years because it's Satya Yuga, with no relatives and fanfare or anything going on, just the two of them serving the personality of Godhead in absolute devotion. Anyway, she's attached. We get attached quickly to something not as exalted as a pure devotee. She's attached, and he's gone. The previous chapter, she's Kardamuni, with the blessings of Kapila Dev, returned back to the forest to meditate on Lord Kapila Dev, meditate on Lord Vishnu within his heart, showing by example this is what you do when you come to a certain stage of life. So, she's feeling bewildered. She says specifically, beginning of this chapter 25, my mind is attached, my intelligence is disturbed, I can't think straight. And I know the philosophy. She doesn't say it that way, but she's saying, I know the philosophy. I know I'm not this body. I know I'm spirit soul. But I'm nonetheless, I'm attached. So what to do? And you're the personality of Godhead. It's your Maya. You put it there so you can pull it away. Please take it away. Please give me instructions so that I can be in consciousness of the absolute truth. So he gives a series of expressions of the process of becoming free from illusion and fixed in the absolute truth. And then she asks him to expand further. I mean, not in this chapter, but in a later chapter, it's related. He's explained the whole system of Sankhya, following Sankhya, meditation on the Supersoul, following meditation on Supersoul, engaging in pure devotional service, and then describes the way of life of one who's fixed in pure devotional service. And she asks the same question just in different ways. Wait a minute. Is it really possible to become fixed in transcendence? Because after all, who can say how many lifetimes we've been involved in matter? We have an affinity for matter. And even if we get elevated like you're doing with me, giving me knowledge, and you go way up there, and what happens after time? You come back again, because there's affinity for matter. It's so strong. Is it really possible for the soul to become free from affinity for matter? And definitely. It's not exaggeration or some other kind of, pump you up so you become a better person. The message of the Bhagavatam is to take us beyond the temporary, into the realm of transcendence. So there's a very nice verse, comes in this chapter 25, where, addressing her question, he says, Kapila says to Devahuti, here's the translation, Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. Now, if you're an Ayurvedic physician, then you'll know something about Agni, and when Agni is weak, then food isn't digested properly, and when food isn't digested properly, then you get undigested food, or and then that all kinds of things break down when you don't have proper digestion. And toxins then go to different parts of the body, and you have this problem, that problem, the other pain, the other. So, but we don't know how fire of digestion is working. It's working. We just eat our food and somehow it digests and assimilates and off we go. Similarly, we don't know how, not with a magnifying device or some kind of detector, do a bhakti detector and detect how bhakti dissolves the subtle body, the material covering. And the material covering, the subtle body, is the foundation or basis for the gross body. So that means if you dissolve the subtle body, then no more material body. Or your body becomes spiritualized during this lifetime and after this lifetime, attaining the spiritual form. No more material bodies. But bhakti, there isn't another process that can do that. It's a very beautiful purport, and it's very clear and explicit. Bhakti has this power. So, two things, something that I say from time to time, noticed and repeat it. In many cases, I've seen, people join the Hare Krishna movement with their mind. And there's acceptance from the mind. And then after some time, the mind isn't fixed, mind is chanchala, and then there's some disturbance in the mind. It's not necessarily disturbance about Krishna consciousness, but disturbance in the mind that makes carrying out Krishna consciousness difficult because so much energy and attention goes to the disturbance in the mind. And determination becomes weak, and distraction and sadhana becomes weak, and it's a struggle. That's not the only thing that happens. Why there's unsteadiness in bhakti, but that's one of them. So how do you go beyond joining the Hare Krishna movement with the mind? You can step back and do it again, maybe a little bit more with the intelligence, but how to act from the platform of the heart. How to come to the position where, regardless of time and circumstance, one is fixed in Krishna consciousness, even at the time of death, or in the time of great tribulation, or at any time, or the time of great success. That one doesn't become inebriated by the success and distracted by so many things that happen when there's there's duality and you're absorbed in the duality, that all takes place within the mind. How to go beyond that? It's bhakti. And there isn't another method. Up, 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 up. But the modes of nature acting and tendencies are there. Down, 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 down. So, what is this bhakti? If it's so unique that alone it can dissolve the subtle body, that means the false ego and the mind and material intelligence. Doesn't mean you don't have a mind and you become mindless or you don't have an intelligence, but spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, spiritual sense of self, even when navigating your way through this world. It's a whole other picture, or a whole other reality. So something that we discussed a little bit, so now I just want to go a little bit more deeply into this principal verse of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's Rupa Goswami's writing, Nectar Devotion. And it's the key verse, the foundational verse that teaches the whole of the science of bhakti. So, anyavilashata shunyam, jnana karma dhyanavritam, anukulyena krishna nushilanam bhaktir uttama. We're going to go through it a little bit slowly. I hope that's okay. It's such an important verse. There's, as you might expect, lengthy commentary by our acharyas. Certainly Prabhupada discusses this in his introduction to Nectar Devotion, but it's also there in commentary, Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So, commonly in ISKCON, there's emphasis on the first two lines, the rejection of fruitive activities and mental speculation. In part, Prabhupada has done that. There are two things that one must do to be Krishna conscious. Reject sense gratification, or the spirit of trying to be the enjoyer of the objects of the senses with material senses. You don't destroy the senses, but that seed of desire to be an enjoyer of material nature. And as far as the tendency to want to know things, give up the tendency to want to know things by the power of speculation, mental speculation. Exactly, if you think about it carefully, it's the mind and the mind. Mind contemplating the objects of the senses, exactly as it's described in Bhagavad Gita. Then one develops a desire. And from the desire, the domino effect is described in Bhagavad Gita. It's the mind. Trying to be the enjoyer this way, trying to be the enjoyer that way. That's the anavritam, doing without them. Then comes what you do. There's the do not, and then there's the do. The prohibition, then the injunction. The exclusive, the inclusive. So, Krishna Anushilanam. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but Jiva Goswami is. And what Jiva Goswami says is, the active verb in this definition is shilanam, in that last line. So a rule of Sanskrit is, to understand a word, you have to understand its root, dhatu. So this word, that shilanam, has as its root shil. And he says, it's important, that's why shil has active and inactive elements. Active is service. Service with the body, service with the mind, and he makes a finer distinction, service with emotion. And then there's an inactive element, What he means by that, he says, is one gets absorbed in, deeply absorbed in. And Krishna, in this case, it means Krishna's form, or the expansions of Krishna's form, or the devotees of Krishna who are intimately associated with Krishna. And the additional word anu means continuous. Continuous service, shilanam, with body, with mind, with emotion, becoming absorbed in this, not sometimes, but sustained, anushilanam, in Krishna and Krishna's devotees. But then comes this other word, anukulyena. Again, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but anukul, we know anukul from Padma Purana. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. Anukul becomes instrumental by adding anukulyena. And what that, I don't know exactly what that means, but he says what it means is it's a necessity. It stands alone, just like Kamsa. He was engaged in negative service to Krishna, but this is anukul, is favorable service. We accept those things that are favorable for bhakti. So service that's friendly or affectionate or with the intention of pleasing. So you put the two together, anukulyena krishnanushilanam, then he says that's the sarup lakshana, the principal characteristic, or just simply anukulyena. So we'll do it again. There's three parts that are secondary and one part that's primary. Sarup and tatastha. Primary and secondary. The secondary ones are what you don't do. You don't engage in sense gratification. You don't engage in mental speculation. And you do activities that are for Krishna or in relation to Krishna. But the Swarup part is for Krishna's pleasure. And without the for Krishna's pleasure part, consciously doing for Krishna's pleasure part, not bhakti. So going from mechanical to devotional activity, we can take any example of something that you might do in devotional service. Offer arti. Ring a bell and make circles with an incense stick. Now that's a behavior, but it's not bhakti. Bhakti includes behavior. You ring the bell and wave the incense stick, so many circles here and so many circles there. And there's a procedure that you follow. There's vidhis, there's rules of how you make offerings and how you do devotional service. But the essence is not the behavior. The essence is the consciousness of wishing that Krishna should be pleased. Now, supposing you're a new devotee. Everyone's a new devotee at some point in time, but supposing there's a new devotee and they don't know a rule and they do something that's like against the rule. But if their intention is to please Krishna, Krishna will accept it. And somebody may be following the rule, but their consciousness is not for the pleasure of Krishna. Krishna is not interested. He's interested in the submission and the devotion. So to move from the head to the heart means to focus on what the real purpose of the activity, the senses, the mind, and the emotion, those three elements that they're material. But directing them with the purpose, all three, senses, mind, and emotion, towards pleasing Krishna. So then, therefore, devotional service can include some hurt feelings or some negative emotion. We had this nice lesson I learned from visiting Ayodhya, that the repeated expression of feelings of sorrow when Ram was leaving, so sorrowful that Dasarath died, and again, the word is used, sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. It's a spontaneous ecstasy. It's one of the sthai bhavas. It looks like horrible. Sorrow doesn't look fun. It looks not fun. Unpleasant. Let's get rid of that sorrow and get some happiness over here instead of sorrow. But it's an ecstasy. It's a sthai bhav. It enhances the primary rasa with Krishna. So that's pleasing to Krishna. The reason that the devotee feels enhancement and pleasure, because it's pleasurable to Krishna. Yes? He's the reservoir of all rasa. And if we're experiencing whatever it is that we're experiencing, that's rasa, it's because it's within Krishna. Like chivalry. Like the example, Krishna's killing demons in Vrindavan, or even Krishna's fighting with grandfather Bhishma. It's an ecstasy. It's an ecstasy for Krishna when Bhishma is firing arrows and it pierces the body of Krishna. Arjuna is thinking, horrible! Those arrows were meant for me, and Krishna is moving over here and over there to catch the arrows. So, how horrible! But Krishna is thinking, It's a chivalry rasa. It's not worldly. When the pleasure of Krishna is at the center. What I'm trying to share this evening, it's not a long class, it's principle-based. Bhakti is that cultivation from the head and the behaviors of the body and even the behaviors of the mind and even the direction of our emotions towards very deeply being dedicated to Krishna's pleasure. That's the life of devotion. That's what this verse is saying. Devoid of sense gratification. The language is simple, but devoid of anasaktasya vishayan, another phrase of Rupa Goswami. Vishaya means sense gratification. Anasaktasya, without attachment to sense gratification. Living your life, performing what's natural for you to perform, because each of us, we have our nature, and we do what's natural for us to do. We don't deny it. We do what's natural for us to do, according to the codes of Dharma, but for the pleasure of Krishna. Anukulyena, Krishna anushilanam. So here's the translation. The highest bhakti, this is a definition of bhakti, and then bhakti is pure, bhakti uttama. The highest bhakti is defined as continuous service or emotions. That's these two meanings of the meanings of shilana or shil. Your body, your mind, your emotions, directed towards Krishna or his expansion forms or others related to him, with a pleasing attitude toward Krishna. It should be devoid of desires other than the desire to please the Lord, and obstructed by impersonal gyan, the materialistic rituals of karma, or other unfavorable acts. It's a really beautiful, I sometimes find Jiva Goswami's commentaries to be really difficult. But this one was really easy. And Vishwanath, similarly. So supposing you have a calamity and you call out for Krishna. That's not wrong. Krishna. It's not the purpose is making Krishna your servant. The purpose is you're taking shelter of Krishna. It's Krishna is your shelter, and just like a parent, when the parent hears the call of their child, they don't feel disturbed, they feel affection. They respond to the call of their child. It's natural. So Krishna's... However, the aspiration it is not to get something except unless it's from this Swarup Shakti, that's his term, that is bhakti itself. This definition is of the Swarup Shakti, is of the spiritual potency of Krishna, because bhakti is of the spiritual potency of Krishna, and therefore the activities are spiritual. And he explains that it's already there. It's not something that you have to generate. It's already there. The soul, well, we'll go to this slide. The living entity is both conscious and consciousness. This is from Tattva Sandarbha. So just like here's a lamp, it's Diwali time, and there's a Diwali lamp. And so the lamp is luminous. And also the lamp spreads light, and it lights up the wall and whatever objects are around. It's both luminous and illuminating. So similarly, the soul is both conscious and consciousness. So to act from the heart is to understand who we are. Now, consciousness spreads, it may go to the emotions. We know what we're feeling. We know what our thoughts are. We know what our body is feeling. It's cold and I didn't have time to put my socks on and it's cold in the room. I'm aware. But so we're conscious of the body, the thoughts in the mind, the feelings that are being the emotions that are moving around within the mind. The goal is not to make those things zero or anesthetized. Not that you become Krishna conscious, you're not conscious of what's around you. But you're conscious of who you are. And what's around you is how you conduct your life, depending upon your nature. So, acting from the heart is something similar to, not exactly identical with, but similar to the soul. It's who we are. Now, this language is poetic language. That the heart is used in different ways, poetically, but at least for our purposes, I'm taking the perspective that acting from the heart, or connecting from the heart, or engaging in service from the heart means with an understanding of who we really are. I had a nice conversation with a devotee the other day, and they were sharing with me, I've been practicing Krishna consciousness for 10 years, and I still don't know who I am. No, Sanatana Goswami said that to Lord Chaitanya, and he was prime minister. I don't know who I am. People say I'm a learned fellow, and I'm such a fool, I think, yeah, I'm a learned fellow. But the fact of the matter is, I don't even know who I am. So acting from the heart means to act from the place of who you really are. And now there's layers and layers and layers of who you really are. We'll see that in just a moment. But just like Lord Brahma, from chanting of mantra, he came to realize his spiritual identity, and he continued further, and then he understood his position as a maidservant. At least the preliminary stages of understanding his spiritual form was that of a maidservant. Just from mantra chanting. There was nothing. There was darkness in all directions. And just him and the lotus flower and his mantra. When illumination occurs, then we can act from the position of who we are. Let's say it conversely. If we're distracted by investing consciousness in who we aren't, we won't understand who we are. And we won't be able to act from our heart. We'll act mechanically, or maybe politely, maybe socially, like nice, but still not know who we are, and still not be acting from the heart. So that's us, and then there's the world around us. Our family and our friends and our community and etc. Those who are out there in the world, and one can connect from the heart. I'm purposely speaking on this because I want to speak some more about it tomorrow morning and then tomorrow evening. This is foundational because it's Rupa Goswami's main verse of the whole Nectar of Devotion, his chief work. To act from the heart, or to connect from the heart, or to relate to others from the heart means in a spiritual conception of who we are and who they are. And it doesn't end there, because who we are and who they are is part and parcel of Krishna. Has to be. Otherwise it's incomplete. So to act from the heart requires Krishna consciousness. And at the same time we're Krishna conscious, or acting from the heart, we're dealing with situations that are in this world. Just as a little example from Scripture. Just last 2 days in St. Louis, they were discussing beginning parts of chapter 12 of Canto 5. It's Judd Bharat finally talks after all these years that he's been apparently deaf and dumb. He speaks to the king. He speaks in such high understanding, absolute knowledge. The king gets off his palanquin, falls at the feet of Judd Bharat, appeals to him for forgiveness, and said, I don't know who you are, but you're obviously not an ordinary person. And I didn't understand what you said. Could you say it again so that I can understand it properly? So the first thing that the second time around, two verses, listen carefully. You're speaking, and keep it simple, you're speaking in such a way that makes it sound like you're your body, and I'm my body, you're the king, and I'm the palanquin carrier, and therefore it's my duty to make you comfortable because you're the king. But this inconvenience that we might be feeling carrying the palanquin, or you might be feeling because we're not attending to the palanquin carrying properly, it's just false. It doesn't. It's unreal. It's illusion. And then beyond the illusion, there's reality. There's the absolute truth. So he's really clear about the absolute truth. The very next verse, he speaks about, nonetheless, you're an unqualified king, which is, he's not a king. He just said it. You're not a king. You're an unqualified king, because kings have affection and care and attend to the well-being of their citizens. And you're a harsh, cruel, mean-spirited, abusive person. You're totally unqualified in character. Even in the illusion side of things, you're unqualified. Shame on you. And in learned circles, no one would respect you. So, putting those two things together, to be acting from the heart doesn't mean you're sentimental. It means that you're self-realized, or you have a spiritual conception of self, and you're moving about in service to Krishna, doing your service to Krishna according to your nature and what is assigned to you to do according to your nature. And there's the humanness, the affection that's natural to extend to others. In this case, the king for his citizens. Now, the king may sometimes punish his citizens, and that's also, if the king is a proper king, he will do so suitable for the wrongdoing. It's one of the glorifications of Dasara. Exactly according to how people would conduct themselves if they had to be disciplined. It was precisely commensurate with what was appropriate. The purpose of some reprimand is to bring people to a stronger position, not just to let them have it for doing something wrong. To bring them to their senses, to bring them to a wholesome position. A loving parent will do like that as well, or anyone that has some position of leadership and authority. They'll exercise it very judiciously. So this is this image here. Consciousness gets extended out into the world, and based upon that consciousness is extended to the world, guided by theistic conduct and conscious of who we really are and our relationship with Krishna, we act with devotion from the heart. It's a new program. We have to kind of like delete all the other software and put on a new software on our hard drive. It's a whole other program. Very different operating system of doing for the pleasure, anukulyena, doing for the pleasure of Krishna. In practical terms, for the pleasure of Krishna. And one last thing. One of the things to add to the whole mix here is sankalpa. Sankalpa means determination, or intention, or the purposefulness, the consciousness, intention of what you do in each thing. Now, I learned this when I was a child. Good intention isn't good enough. But it doesn't mean you don't care about what intention is. Right intention needs to be properly guided. Therefore, we require guidance. We require teachings and teachers, and we require it. But you have to have the right intention. Either otherwise, good guidance, you can be misused. There's a definition that connecting to this word sankalpa, or intention, or determination, is this verse from Rupa Goswami's writings that's quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's the definition of sadhana bhakti. when you're doing sadhana bhakti, there needs to be an intention or sankalpa. Otherwise, it's not bhakti. Should I say it again? It's the same as this anukulyena. There has to be a proper intention when you're doing the activities of bhakti. Otherwise, it's not bhakti. Ring a bell and wave some incense stick. There's behaviors, but behavior that's not connected with the right intention, then it's not sadhana bhakti. Or to some degree, you ring the bell and wave the incense stick. There's some submission to the authority that told you this is how you do achman, and this is how you ring the bell, and so forth. So there's some submission. It's not a zero. But cultivation of bhakti, to move from the head to the heart, is for the pleasure of Krishna, the intention of pleasing Krishna. This is where this definition that our acharyas describe above Rupa Goswami's verse, desiring that bhakti awaken. I may not even have a clear idea. I may be so new, I don't even know what bhakti is. I may have a mistaken idea of what bhakti is. But if the intention is, I want to come closer to Krishna, what's the mission or the objective or the goal of life? What's important to us? What's important to each one of us? At the end of our life, the conveyor belt is about to finish. Where do we want to be? What's the goal that we want ourselves to be achieving? So, achieving bhakti, that's bhakti. So, here's this definition. Actions of the senses which produce the stage of bhava is called sadhana bhakti. This attained state is an eternal existence which is not created, but simply manifests within the soul by the spiritual energy of the Lord. Its commentary says this is Swarup Shakti. The internal potency of Krishna is what devotional service is. So the nature of the activity, even it's the body and it's a material thing, it's spiritualized or it's spiritual. The mind depends on if the mind is going to Krishna when we're chanting, or if the mind is in the gutter when we're chanting. Makes a difference. Or distracted, and commonly the mind is distracted. So therefore, the abhas stage of chanting is to try to bring the mind to Krishna, to be attentive to the sound of Krishna's name, and the sound of Krishna's name is Krishna. We wanting, having that intention of reaching the stage of genuine bhakti, spontaneous, natural bhakti. And there's just a few slides remaining. These are taken from Kanchanavali's Crying for Krishna. When, oh when, will tears fill my eyes when I chant your holy name? Help me chant with true feeling, with all my heart. So that little girl looks like she's really calling out to Krishna with all her heart. At least for that period of time. Who knows what happens next? Oh, all auspicious Krishna, because of my offenses, my heart has become diseased. Please heal my heart and restore it to health. My steel-framed heart melts. Make my steel-framed heart melt when I chant your holy name. This steel-framed heart is a phrase, just going to read quickly, from Canto 2, Chapter 3. It's spoken about the glories of chanting. Certainly that heart is steel-framed. which, in spite of chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change. When ecstasy takes place, tears fill the eyes and the hairs stand on end. That was curious. Steel framed. Was there steel 5,000 years ago? So the word that Prabhupada has translated as steel is ashma saram, and ashma has different meanings. Stone, when the mind is beyond the modes of nature, it's ashma, so fixed. So it can have that kind of connotation. Anyway, hard-hearted, steel-framed heart. And the description of this verse is that in the first 3 chapters of Canto 2, in one sense, it's a summary of the whole Bhagavatam, because it's when Shukadev starts to speak, and he's been asked by Maharaj Parikshit, what is it that one is to hear, chant, and always remember, and what's the duty of someone who's about to die? So he takes him through step by step. The Virat Rupa, the meditation on the super soul, and then bhakti. That's this chapter 3 is bhakti chapter. Progressive. Form a conception of a personal manifestation of God. Fix your mind upon Him as the Lord of the heart. Be engaged in full devotional service to Lord Vishnu. Prabhupada's words, this change of heart phrase. The mature stage of Vishnu worship is suggested herein in relation to the change of heart. He has it 5 times in the purport. The whole process of spiritual culture is aimed at changing the heart of the living entity in the matter of his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord. So, with the progress of devotional service, the reaction of change in the heart is exhibited by gradual detachment from the sense of material enjoyment, by a false sense of lording it over the world, and an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. So it's Prabhupada's way of saying what Rupa Goswami's definition says. Both the definition of sadhana bhakti and the definition of bhakti in general. Change of heart. So the change of heart, again, is this moving from mechanical and simply dutiful. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it this way: duty and love are not on the same platform. Duty is good, but duty is, when done in the consciousness of cultivating for the pleasure of the person the duty is being rendered unto, then love awakens. You can just be dutiful because it's good to be dutiful. And I'm kind of speaking to myself because it's part of my nature, I'm dutiful. But it's also part of, I think, all of our nature is we want to go beyond just being good or, respectful and honest and mode of goodness kind of person, become pleasing to Krishna. Beyond duty is the position of love, and love is where you want the other to be pleased, and ultimately others will be pleased. On the soul platform, others will be pleased by the consciousness of wanting to please Krishna. And circumstantially, it may not look like it for some time, but ultimately, there's so many nice stories in Chaitanya Charitamrita, for example, that teach this. Krishna is pleased when he sees the devotees in this mood of wanting to please him, and wanting to please him, Krishna is pleased. So, oh clever Krishna, please awaken within my heart a genuine attraction for pure devotional service. Help me to develop real Vaishnava qualities. Qualities, just like the lamp has illumination and heat. You got a lamp, you're going to have illumination, you're going to have heat. You have a soul that's acting for the pleasure of Krishna. Vaishnava qualities are going to decorate that soul. Naturally. Naturally. You have to separately endeavor. For the pleasure of Krishna, you may endeavor to be pleasing to Krishna. That's bhakti. That's not a separate endeavor. But then the decoration of those qualities coming to you, it's natural. It's natural. Last image here. Extending consciousness in our lives as devotees into the world. Again, different circles, our family, our friends, our community, the people around us, the people outside, people, all the people. Prahlad's compassion goes to all living entities, very specific. Please don't just deliver me, deliver all the suffering living entities in creation. That's the magnitude of Prahlad's love and compassion. So whatever the circle of interest is, it starts with what's inside the heart, or the identity of self as a spiritual part and parcel of Krishna, wanting to be acting always in our relationship with Krishna in whatever the sphere of activity is that we're doing. And cultivating our chanting and our hearing carefully. If we neglect our chanting or get distracted too much by circumstance from chanting and hearing, everything becomes more difficult. Krishna becomes more obscured. Don't make that mistake. Stay in your relationship. Be present in your relationship with Krishna as you're doing your practice of devotion, hankering the sankalpa, the determination or intention to become nicely situated in your relationship with Krishna. And whatever Krishna brings to you in the form of service or circumstances of life, you're ready to embrace those circumstances of life in the mood of serving him. That's Krishna Bhakti. So I'll continue on this theme. You'll hear some more of this as we go along. Any comments or questions? Yes, hey Mangi. Do we have a microphone?
Guru Maharaj, I have two questions. On the point that you were making, that the king disciplines and the parents discipline the dependents, and you also mentioned the context of modern thing that even the leaders need have the function to discipline. It's more a personal question, like in my service, I do have that function. So how to make sure that, because I'm on a mixed platform, so how can I make sure that when I'm trying to discipline or trying to do this service, it's in a mood of service and not motivated by something else, even though consciously I know that I'm thinking I'm not motivated.
Yeah. Well, you started off on the right foot, which is, given the mix that I know that is there. So, your question is, how can I be sure? But the answer is, you can be sure there's going to be a mix.
Yes.
To be honest with oneself and Krishna and those who you are disciplining, there's a mix. And my dear Lord Krishna, that it's to whom are you offering this service? My dear Lord Krishna, it's my duty as mother. And there's a mix. And now, how, my dear Lord Krishna, you please help me to do this in the mood of for you and for the welfare of the ultimate well-being, and even temporary well-being of those who I'm disciplining, whether it's mother to child, or it's not just in your capacity as the president of the temple. We all have some relationships that we have those that are above us and those that are peers and those that are subordinate to us, and we may, with our peers or those below us and even those above us, have to extend ourselves in some way that's offering some kind of words of correction. So the essence is, what Prabhupada said with Gurukul is, discipline must be preceded by love. So that when the person who's receiving the discipline, they understand it's coming from a place of love. And therefore, unless one has that relationship, like the teacher-student or the parent-child, unless that position is actually established, one shouldn't give instruction. You may, have somebody else give that instruction who has that relationship with that person. So it gets refined and subtle a little bit. Going back to the beginning part, the premise, there's a mix. So I'm not going to execute this perfectly. But I want to come to that stage that Krishna is pleased, even I'm imperfect. So Krishna will accept if that's the consciousness, and Krishna will correct and refine if that's the consciousness that you want to do it for him. That's the elevating principle. To go from mixed to unmixed, to go from shadow to pure, abhas bhakti to shuddha bhakti. Tivrena bhakti yogena. Like that. Go ahead.
You kind of answered my second question, because I was going to say that sometimes in certain relationships, the love or the understanding of the love may not be there, but then you have a function where you are kind of asked to discipline. So for me, that's the challenge I find.
Depends on the circumstance, but you may choose right away, in the immediate moment, to invest in the relationship before any words of correction. So that the relationship is understood that it's coming from a place of love. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on if others are at risk, or there's many subtleties. And some people, they're just very skilled at asking or instructing directly. I remember, it's anecdotal, but there was a period of time when we were starting strategic planning for North America, along with helping with this Turley case thing. So we had some meetings in Los Angeles, and we had them in Los Angeles because that's where Gopal Bhatta lived. It was just convenient for him, he's busy. So we went there, and Sovas was fun. So during a lunch break, he just kind of walked up to me. I didn't know him at all. I knew by name, but I didn't have any understanding of him. And, his hands in his pockets, and just kind of casual said, "Do you mind if I ask you what you think of me?" Pretty direct. And then, what that leads to is the converse. What do you think of me? Until then, just like, let's cut to the chase and let's have a real relationship, rather than the cosmetic one. Anyway, so some people are really good at that. They don't. Some people aren't. Something else? Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. We discussed this verse last year in Gita Nagari 2, the steel frame heart.
Yes.
And superficially, I have not read the purport of this verse, but if we read it superficially, it really looks like a karma mimamsa philosophy. Like when you do this, the result will be this. The reason I'm saying that, in one of the, I think it was letter or something, where Prabhupada is talking to one of his disciples, and where Prabhupada is saying that Krishna is not obliged to give you
Correct.
love of God.
That's correct.
Just because you're chanting.
Correct.
But if we think deeply, I'm not sure about the purport. If we think deeply, then definitely mercy is there.
Yeah.
That will help. But superficially, it really looks like it's...
Well, that's superficial. Your language is correct. Because, in fact, he's not obliged, and it's also a fact he's very loving. He doesn't do because he's obliged. He does because he's loving. But in his lovingness, it may be this way, maybe that way, it may take eons, and it may happen in a moment, and it's completely in his hand. But it's not mechanical, but at the same time it's a science. And it's resting upon Krishna's merciful nature. It's not, the rule isn't the same. It may look the same, it's not the same. The world of Krishna is a world of love, not a world of law. In China they say, China is a government of law. And Goloka is a government of love. Everything is governed by, and it's one sense unpredictable, in another sense predictable. Predictable in the sense that Krishna is kind. Now how that kindness will come, and at what point in time it will come, in a way that's intelligible to us, who can say? But it's the nature of the spiritual realm, predictably. Not mechanically, but predictably.
So, can I just add?
Yeah.
So that means it is right, the verse which is saying that is not exactly it is. The words of the verse, what it says, if you chant and you don't have a love of God, that means you have a steel frame heart.
Oh, that's what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure what your question is. Are you sure what your question is?
Yeah.
I'm not. Can you try it again?
Yeah. So what I was trying to say, this verse where it says that when you chant and if you don't have ecstasy or tears fill your eyes, then you have a
No,
steel
that isn't
frame.
what it says. Let's read it again. You want to hear it again? Certainly that heart is steel-framed, which, in spite of chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place, tears fill the eyes, and hairs stand on end. Should I read it again? Certainly that heart is steel-framed which, in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change. When ecstasy takes place, tears fill the eyes and hairs stand on end. Now, I guess you could read it in two different ways. Those are symptoms of the change of heart, or despite the bodily transformations, your heart remains hard. The heart doesn't change. Have you ever, I'll put it positively, I've had experiences with people that are, by their own admission, they're materialistic, and something happens when they are in nice kirtan or something like that, or they hear a nice story, they start crying. So when that's where the heart doesn't change. It's still materialistic. So that's one way of reading what this says. But a qualifier that's not unclear is chanting with concentration. Mind is concentrated on chanting. You know, kirtan has become a fashionable thing these days. Not amongst the devotee community, but other than devotee community people. They feel something. But have they dedicated themselves and they feeling something to become devotee of Krishna or Vishnu? And if that's the case, what Prabhupada explains in the purport is due to offense, and it gives the 10 offenses and describes them. Thinking the name is something material, etc. All right? Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, up front.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Practice bhakti from the true nature. Is the true nature relates to the nature of in Varnashrama Dharma, that there are 4 different categories? Is that how I should understand, Maharaj?
You were speaking slowly and then you spoke real fast and I didn't catch it all. Are you asking, is the 4 divisions of Varna and Ashram the same as Bhakti? Is that your question?
No. The true nature of like we have to chant, we have to practice devotional service from understanding our true nature, right?
Well, I'm not even sure what you're saying just now. There's practices of sadhana, and the practices of sadhana is not our true nature. Our true nature is the eternal servant of Krishna, in the mature stage, exhibiting and experiencing love of God. That's our true nature.
You're true, like who we are. That you mentioned that like by knowing who we are.
Yes. Okay. So we are Krishna's eternal servant. That's that preliminary, who we really are. There's further and further, but that's preliminary. So help me to understand what you're wanting to know, because I'm not clear.
Yeah, I misunderstood that, Maharaj, that who we are is like, is it something, it comes into Varnashrama Dharma category, or that is where my clarification was?
No, something else.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Then the one over here, then we're done.
Guru Maharaj, you mentioned one needs to direct our senses, mind and emotions to pleasing Krishna.
Well, that's what Rupa Goswami says. Yeah.
Could you please elaborate a little bit more on the emotions?
Well, emotions is feelings. So like I gave the example, by contemplating objects of the senses, one develops some attachment for them, so that there's some feeling. It can be repulsion also. That's a feeling. Attraction and repulsion is a feeling. And it's something, feelings towards something, one way or another, is something that's carried in the mind. And as long as those feelings, emotions, are not connected to Krishna, it's Maya. And when those feelings are connected to Krishna, then it's Krishna consciousness. There's the spiritual side of emotion and there's the material side of emotion. Specifically, that's what you want to hear more about, emotion?
Yes, Gurmaharaj.
Feelings. So, the fundamental pivot point of material existence is wanting to be an enjoyer of what is Krishna's. And so, emotion is in relation to those objects and how one is interacting with those objects. And then of all varieties of what feelings might be. And that's material. So what the verse is saying is the senses, the mind, you would say the contemplations in the mind, and the emotions should be directed toward Krishna in such a way as pleasing to him. And we accept those things and we reject the other kind. We just don't go there, like the lamentation or whatever the other kinds are.
I see. Thank you, Maharaj.
There he goes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj, just the verse that we started off with, where we learned that bhakti dissolves the subtle body, which includes the mind. And just the verse before, it was stated that mind is the representation of the Supreme Lord. So it seems like there is a transition from talking about spiritual mind to talking about material mind. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah.
So
It's similar to his question. Emotions that are spiritual material, the mind is spiritual material. So it's the material mind that dissolves, not the spiritual one.
mhm.
And the mind that goes to Krishna is without the contamination. So he's describing the process, the bhakti process, the process that dissolves the material mind, or the subtle body. Does that answer your question?
Oftentimes when we describe the whole process, we either choose the track of spiritualizing the material mind, and sometimes we also say that we dissolve the material mind. And now these two are, material mind is like a covering and the spiritual mind is what is part of the real swarup of the soul. So,
I'm waiting.
I'm trying to see whether our choice of explanation in one direction, which is about spiritualizing the material mind, in which case it is not necessarily we are dissolving, but that there is a transformation taking place, versus the
Well,
real.
It's language. It's linguistic or semantic. To spiritualize the mind that's material becomes spiritualized. Is it matter anymore? You know, the element or the dimension, rather, the dimension of material is forgetfulness. And the forgetfulness is then it acts in a material way, and the acting in a material way is dissolved or spiritualized by the touch of bhakti. I don't have a problem with it. Let's just take, your tongue. And it's not you dissolve your tongue, or you dissolve the capacity of the tongue to taste or vibrate. It becomes spiritualized by contact with the holy name. So the spiritual action of the tongue becomes spiritualized. And so that's the gross body, and then move it to the subtle platform, the ability to taste the name. So the deity. The deity is Krishna. And you can, if one is not devotional and careful, one can break the deity. It can happen. It has happened in some places. The deities have been placing the flute of Krishna in his hand, and they had this happen in Australia. The thumb broke. So, is the deity no longer marble because he's worshipped? The deity is not marble. It depends on your devotion. This question came before the GBC. Australia devotees, I've learned, they have this tendency to every now and then they get into this big issue about something. And they bring it to the GBC to solve the big issue. So in this case, there was a deity in one of the temples that the thumb had broken many times. They mended the deity and they were saying, some say, according to scripture, da-da-da-da, and some say, da-da-da-da. We take it to the GBC. So the discussion went around and around for a while. And then there's references in Hari Bhakti Vilas that say both. The deity is, if broken, is to be taken to the sea and replace the deity. And there's other places that say that the deity is Krishna. You don't throw your child away because the child breaks his thumb. You fix the thumb. So then Sanatana Goswami indicates that these principles are to be observed according to the devotion of the individual. So one may say about spiritualizing the mind, then it's no longer acting in a material way. Then it's spiritual mind. Does it get dissolved, or does it get spiritualized, which is your question? And in one sense, either way you say it, it's the same thing. The material action of the mind is dissolved, but the mind is there. The spiritual action of the mind is there.
Thank you very much.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.